After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
President Joe Biden from his farewell address from last night, words that deserve our attention and our action. It's Thursday, January 16th, 2025. And this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. President Biden sees what we see, an incoming administration that more closely resembles a blatant Russian-style plutocratic oligarchy than any in modern history. Some will argue that we've been in that state for a while now, but any pretense otherwise appears lost on the Trump machine. Erica Green at the New York Times says Biden's remarks recall those of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who referred to a growing military-industrial complex in his farewell address. In 2025, we face instead a tech-industrial complex in which President Biden warns of the erosion of truth itself brought forth by social media platforms unencumbered by inconvenient fact-checkers and artificial intelligence. We're at a point where it's more important than ever to be following information sources you can actually trust. And so we once again thank you for being part of the Progress Texas family. As Joe Biden saddles up to ride into the sunset, let's have a quick look at the legal bill back here in Texas that our Attorney General has racked up suing his administration. Megan Stringer at Axios San Antonio tallies it up at just over $6 million Texas taxpayer dollars dumped by Ken Paxton into over 100 demonstrative lawsuits, among those resistance to federal plans to send voting monitors to some Texas counties during the last election, a federal program that grants an easier path to citizenship for undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens, vaccine mandates, endangered species listings, and on. To borrow a phrase, Ken Paxton's not going to have Joe Biden to kick around anymore, and that's not especially good news in itself. Meanwhile, in Paxtonville, Jim Vertuno at the Associated Press writes that Nate Paul, the Austin real estate developer whose relationship with Paxton was at the center of Paxton's impeachment trial last year, pleaded guilty yesterday to a federal charge of lying to a financial institution. Paxton was not mentioned in the federal indictments against Paul, which accused the developer of making false statements to banks in order to obtain more than $170 million in loans. To D.C. for a couple this morning, Matthew Choi at the Texas Tribune says John Ratcliffe, who represented Northeast Texas in the U.S. House from 2015 to 2020 and is one of Donald Trump's biggest cheerleaders, promised during his Senate Intelligence Committee confirmation hearing yesterday that should he get the job leading the CIA, he'll do so, quote, never allowing political or personal biases to cloud our judgment, unquote. By now, we've learned that what's said in these hearings by Trump's nominees frequently are at complete odds with what happens later, i.e. Roe v. Wade. But Ratcliffe did reportedly differ with Trump following the 2020 presidential election, warning against attempts to overturn the election results, fearing that would be detrimental for the country's democracy, a warning that obviously fell on deaf ears, of course. Also from D.C., Jeremy Wallace at the Houston Chronicle has an unsurprising report on two Democratic congressmen, Reps. Henry Cuellar of Laredo and Vicente Gonzalez of McAllen, who once again broke ranks with their delegation earlier this week to vote for a bill banning transgender athletes from competing in girls' and women's sports from elementary school to college. Cuellar and Gonzalez were the only two Democrats in the House to back the bill, considering that hating on trans people was a major theme in Republican ads in Texas during last year's election. It appears as though at least two of our Democrats have thrown in the towel on that issue. Back to Texas on this third day of the 89th legislature, where once again we remind ourselves that some promises made in politics turn out to be empty promises made to fulfill short-term goals. Before Democrats pat themselves on the back too hard over the upending of MAGA plans and electing Lubbock Representative Dustin Burrows as House Speaker, I gotta say I'm not privy to any hard promises made by him to actually defy his party's plans in practice, specifically plans to literally sideline the Democratic minority by banning them from chairing committees and deprioritizing their legislation. Edward McKinley and Isaac Yu at the San Antonio Express-News have a review of Burrows' track record up. As we mentioned yesterday, he survived a scandal in 2019 when he was caught on tape plotting to target 10 of his fellow Republicans in their upcoming primary races. That situation led to the resignation of then-Speaker Dennis Bonnen and Burrows stepping down as chair of the House GOP caucus. Burrows' very first bill in 2017 aimed to prevent school districts from suspending or terminating teachers for incorporating Bible stories into their lesson plans. Most notably, the Death Star bill, stripping away local control at the city and county level, was perhaps Burrows' biggest moment up to the present. Nice rundown on the background of our new speaker, linked in the show notes. One of only 3 Democratic votes against Dustin Burrows in the second round of voting came from Richardson Rep. Ana Maria Rodriguez Ramos, which left some progressives a bit puzzled. On that, Faith Bugenhagen at the Houston Chronicle says Ramos, who was the first Democrat to take her bid for Speaker all the way to the House floor in over 2 decades, by the way, calls it a protest vote, saying she would have preferred the Democratic delegation to unite behind her to, quote, defend working Texans instead of making 37 individual deals, unquote. Rep. Ramos expects Burrows to quickly bury any hopes Democrats might have of avoiding a hard-right MAGA circus in the 2025 session. Action you can take today from wherever you are, and ASAP, please, as the deadline approaches at the end of the week. Back in December, you might recall the Biden administration released its long-awaited critical analysis of the environmental, economic, and public health impacts of liquid natural gas, or LNG, exports. The findings make the Department of Energy's LNG permitting process crystal clear that LNG exports are not in the public interest. Instead, shipping Americans' finite resources to foreign adversaries only makes money for billionaires. Approving more LNG exports will also raise your electric bill, undermine global progress on climate change, and harm communities already overburdened by pollution. Progress Texas is asking you, dear listener, to submit a comment to the DOE telling President Biden to finalize these 21st century common sense rules and reject all pending LNG export permits. Progress Texas Advocacy Manager Reagan Stone says, quote, we're watching the horrific fires on the West Coast just months after the deadly floods on the East Coast. Before climate allies leave the White House, they need to hear from you. Demand that Biden protects American families from rising energy costs and archaic big oil and gas expansions. 2024 was the hottest year on record, and oil and gas pipeline infrastructure is exploding, endangering children and families from the Permian Basin to the Gulf of Mexico. It's now or never to make your voices heard, unquote. Submit your comment today via the convenient link you'll find in our show notes. Our funding here at Progress Texas is rarely sufficient for us to plan much more than a quarter or two ahead, but the conservative disinformation machine has no such obstacle. They're funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups. Our regular everyday listeners like you form a key component of our funding here at Progress Texas, and we could use your support as a monthly contributor. No amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate to get signed up. Thanks to Will Judy, Bill Holston, and Joseph Gorman, all of whom have joined the team lately. We appreciate all of you very much. While you're at the website, make sure and hit our web store for the merch to match your progressive values. Y'all means all Revolution and our most popular Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts, all there and union printed right here in Texas, and lots more, all at progresstexas.org. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Thursday, January 16th, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll catch you again tomorrow morning.